はい、それでは、17番目、慶應義塾湘南藤沢高等部、Tcks の皆さんで Third Culture Kids どうぞ。
Hi, our presentation is on Third Culture Kids, and we're going to start with a video of students from our school. We asked them how they felt when they came back to Japan after living abroad for a long time.
I felt kind of odd.
I felt odd.
Oh, I felt stressed.
I felt stressed.
I actually felt happy.
Confused. Like a superstar.
Homesick. Like worried.
Third Culture Kids, often abbreviated as TCK, refer to children who grew up in a culture different from their home countries. By home country, we are referring to the country that's on your passport.
The third culture is the culture identity that the child assumes between their parents' culture and the one that they were raised in. So, to get personal responses from a large sample, we decided to interview and conduct a survey on third culture kids around the world through friends and mutual connections.
Through our efforts, we were able to collect data from more than 300 students. Most of the people who answered the survey were living outside of their home country by the time they were 6 years old, therefore spending their early developmental years abroad. This could cause problems when they come back to their home country because they have a half-developed sense of cultural identity.
In addition to this, a large majority of third cultural kids spent a large portion of their lives abroad, while only a small number spent a considerable amount of time in their home country. This is the leading cause of cultural homelessness. This is Greg. He's an average 16-year-old TCK would look like, and this is his life story.
He spent 8.8 years in his home country.
He lived in 3 countries and spent 6.6 years abroad.
He carries the typical problems that TCKs face, such as culture shock.
So what problems do third culture kids, like Greg, actually face? We decided to make this our research question. We knew from personal experience that being a third culture kid can be extremely hard.
To find more specific answers to our research question, we asked questions on our survey in order to find out the kinds of problems that TCKs face in their home country. From our research, we found that out of the many unique problems that TCKs face, our major concerns are these.
Out of these 6 points, we decided to focus on culture shock, reverse culture shock, and cultural homelessness. Culture shock is a feeling of disorientation experienced in an unfamiliar culture.
Reverse culture shock is essentially the same, except it's experienced in an unfamiliar part of one's home country's culture.
As you can see, surprise was by far the most common reaction to culture shock, with 74% of the respondents reporting to have experienced it. Curiosity came second at 50%, and stress came third at 41%.
On the survey, a lot of people talked about their personal experiences as a TCK. One of the respondents wrote,
I think returnees tend to feel out of place everywhere. There's no one that actually went through everything with you and grew up in that environment.
From empathizing with their comments, we knew that we had to create a platform that would help TCKs. A common theme that came up in their comments was that TCKs tend to feel isolated and confused.
We concluded that the best way to help TCKs was to connect them with others who have gone through similar experiences. Having a network of TCKs who understand multiple cultures and languages in this age of globalization can prove to be a useful tool in all areas of society.
In this modern world with its advancing technology, we decided to use the internet as a means of connecting TCKs all around the world.
To do so, we created this website. On here, TCKs and non-TCKs can help and connect with each other.
We created several sections on our website based on our main goal. Our main goal is to provide a space where third culture kids can find their own identity.
By communicating with our users through our website, we plan on improving our services to help even more third culture kids.
We also assist TCKs with getting used to new schools by helping with academics, including translations and tutoring. We also introduce schools and cram schools that are welcoming towards TCKs that provide unique courses made for them.
Through the live chats and forums on our website, TCKs can meet others like themselves that they can relate to.
There are special opportunities for TCKs, such as internships and school programs. For example, they can volunteer on our website to provide translations for school material, but also provide counseling for our other users.
By collecting more data, we can create a broader and more accurate database of TCKs.
We also plan on categorizing and analyzing our data by factors such as country and number of years spent abroad. These are factors that can significantly affect a TCK's life.
Identifying these variables can help us create a more exact analysis of the data, which in return will help us help more third culture kids.
Since our website is currently focused on Japanese returnees, our next step is to take it to a global level.
We aim to host meetups in many countries, connecting TCKs not only in Japan, but around the world.
We also plan on gaining sponsors and collaborating with different organizations in order to make our website a more resourceful tool. Ultimately, we want to create a space where third culture kids can find their own place and use their experiences to contribute to society. If you would like, please check out our website, and maybe
You might find your own place too.
Thank you for listening.
はい、ありがとうございました。誰から行くかな。はい、吉健先生どうぞ。
Thank you very much. It's a topic that I have been interested in for a long, long period of time, myself, being a TCK. One thing that I would like to ask is, at present, you're still focusing on the Japanese returnees, right? Are there any differences, for example, what factors seem to play a role in the different kinds of identities that the so-called returnees have? For example, when if they went abroad at a very young age versus at a slightly older age versus how many years they've been abroad, and also in what part of the world they live during that period. Are there any tendencies or characteristics that you can talk a little bit about?
Well, as we mentioned in our presentation, a lot of the people surveyed left their home country at a very young age. So when they were growing up, they experienced a different culture from their home country, and I think that they began to identify with it. And I think that going abroad at a younger age typically tends to make that person identify more with other cultures than their own home country. And as for Japanese returnees, I think that a lot of Japanese returnees, since they come back to a Japanese school rather than, say, if an American person who lived abroad came back to their school, they would probably still be going from an international school back to an American school. And there's not much different with the education system for Americans, but for Japanese kids, since the language differs, it's harder for them to adjust to a Japanese culture.
Thank you. I think that's very true, especially in terms of language. So there's a big difference. But also in the United States, there is a group called Global Nomads, which talks about the fact that even Americans who go abroad and attend international schools and American schools abroad, when they go back to the United States, they can't seem to fit in. So it's not simply a problem of language, but it's something a little deeper than that. Huh?
Yeah.
So maybe if you can come up in the future, if you can come up with more factors related to what makes a person, I think that would be really, really helpful. A very interesting site.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
はい、じゃあ野原先生どうぞ。
Thank you very much for such an interesting speech. I'm interested in whether you have encountered any specific TCK culture throughout your activities. Maybe, not Japanese, not American or anything else, but their own common cultural sort of behavioral patterns or thinking patterns.
Okay, so all of us are TCKs, and we lived in different countries. For example, she lived in America, she lived in Thailand and America. I lived in London, England, and Singapore. But one thing we all have in common is that when there is some particular phrase that can't be kind of explained in one language, for example, even if we're talking in Japanese, if there's a phrase that only exists in English, we can use that phrase and all of us will still understand it. So I think a TCK culture is kind of, we understand both languages, and even other than languages, there are customs that only we understand because we're a mix of two cultures or more.
That's really interesting. Does it help, TCK people to find another sort of place to settle beyond any sort of border?
For my case, it really did help because when I first came to Japan, people kind of shunned me for like the way I was American, and so having people who found it, understood how it was a cultural thing and not my sort of thing, kind of helped me feel like I wasn't weird because of who I was, and find people who I could connect with, and feel that I could, identify myself finally.
クリスさんどうぞ。
Yeah, I have lived abroad for a long time as well, so I'd just like to ask very quickly. I know we're running out of time, but who's your role model?
For me, I went to a Japanese hoshuko when I lived in America, and the teacher that I had for my last year, he was a very great person, and he was also very caring, and he genuinely cared about how I would do after I moved back to Japan when I told him that I was moving back, and he was a Japanese person living in America. So I think he was a great example of a TCK even as an adult, because he was more on the Japanese side, I think, but he genuinely understood how I acted and felt in America and how I would in Japan. So.
はい、どうもありがとうございました。全然 weird じゃないですよ。